Billionaire CEO laughed at a black waitress, then froze when her 9 languages saved his $1 deal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Picture this, a high-end, private dining room tucked away in one of the most prestigious restaurants in New York City. The chandelier overhead gleams, casting a soft glow on the sleek, polished surfaces of the room. The rich and powerful are seated at the long table, discussing the future of business, wealth, and cutting-edge technologies. At the head of the table sits a billionaire CEO, Richard Owens, the founder and owner of a multi-billion-dollar tech company. He's tall, imposing, dressed in a designer suit that costs more than most people's yearly salary. His presence commands attention. As he speaks, everyone listens. He's the kind of man who's used to being in control, the kind of man who believes his wealth and status place him above others. And then, there's the waitress, a young black woman named Maria Carter. She stands off to the side, unseen, invisible in the eyes of the men and women seated at the table. Her black dress is standard for the job, her movements quiet and swift as she refills glasses and clears plates. Maria is no stranger to the looks and glances of those around her. People who dismiss her as just another server, someone who doesn't belong in the same room as the powerful elite. She's used to the condescending comments, the whispered remarks that she can't hear, but that sting all the same. But tonight, something is different. She's standing near the table when the conversation turns to an important business deal, one worth over $1 billion. Richard Owens is discussing the future of his company and the high stakes involved in the merger. His words are filled with arrogance as he outlines the potential profits, the global expansion, the success they're sure to achieve. But then, Richard says something that catches Maria off guard. With a sly smile, he turns to her and asks, "So, what do you think, sweetheart? You know anything about tech deals or foreign markets? I bet you've never even heard of half the languages I deal with." The room falls silent for a moment. The comment is pointed, mocking, and made in front of the very people he's trying to impress. Maria's heart races, but she doesn't flinch. She's heard worse. But there's something about the way Richard says it, the casual dismissal, the assumption that she's incapable of understanding anything beyond what's expected of her, that pushes her to the edge. For a brief second, she thinks about ignoring him, about staying silent, keeping her head down like she always does. But then, she remembers something. She remembers the languages she's learned over the years. She remembers the books she's read, the nights she stayed up late studying, the languages that flow off her tongue like second nature. Maria has learned 9 languages in total, a skill she developed not just out of necessity, but out of passion. She knows Arabic, French, Mandarin, Spanish, and others. She's never boasted about it. But tonight, something clicks inside her. The mocking tone from Richard, the assumption that she's just a server, someone unworthy of recognition. It's too much. With a calm breath, she steps forward, her eyes meeting Richard's for the first time since he made the comment. "Actually, I do know a thing or two about foreign markets and business," she says, her voice steady. "And I speak 9 languages. Arabic, French, Mandarin, Spanish, and more." Richard pauses. The room falls completely still. He laughs, thinking she's joking, but then Maria switches effortlessly into French, offering a translation for a part of the deal they were discussing. The entire room is silent. Richard's smile fades. He's stunned. Maria continues, switching from French to Mandarin, then to Arabic, explaining parts of the deal and market strategies that no one expected her to know. Richard Owens, the billionaire CEO, is frozen in place. He stares at her, his mind racing, trying to comprehend how this woman, this waitress he had so casually dismissed, had just outshone him with her knowledge and intellect. The guests at the table are equally shocked. The powerful, the elite, the men and women who had once ignored her. Now they're watching her, listening, realizing that the real power in the room isn't held by the CEO, but by the woman they never thought to notice. Richard Owens clears his throat, trying to regain his composure. He attempts to brush off the situation with a nervous laugh, but the damage has been done. Maria has not only proven herself capable, she has flipped the script. And in that moment, she changes the room's dynamic forever. I had never seen anything like this before. The air in the room felt heavier now. Richard Owens, the billionaire CEO who had built his empire from the ground up, was no longer the dominant force in the room. His face, once so self-assured and proud, now showed an unmistakable flicker of uncertainty. Maria stood there, her calm demeanor unshaken, as she continued to effortlessly navigate through languages, explaining complex aspects of the deal that even Richard himself had struggled to grasp. The room was silent, but not in the way it had been before. This was a silence filled with awe, respect, and disbelief. The powerful men and women who once saw her as just another invisible worker were now watching her with wide eyes, trying to comprehend how a mere waitress could possess such an extraordinary skill. Richard's attempts to regain control were futile. He cleared his throat, trying to maintain his authority, but the damage had already been done. His smug confidence had been shattered by a woman he had once dismissed as insignificant. The room remained still, like a moment frozen in time, as everyone processed the unexpected turn of events. Maria, however, remained composed. She wasn't looking for recognition. She wasn't trying to prove anything. This was simply who she was. She had spent years learning languages, not to impress anyone, but because they gave her a sense of empowerment in a world that often tried to ignore her. Now, her skills were doing the speaking for her, and they were louder than any words Richard could muster. It was a surreal feeling. For years, she had been overlooked, underestimated, treated as if she was invisible. But tonight, everything had changed. Maria wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the reason the billion-dollar deal had a chance to succeed. Richard's attempts to brush off the situation failed miserably. He muttered something under his breath about cultural differences and tried to regain his usual smirk, but it was clear to everyone in the room that the tables had turned. The very people who had laughed at her, who had questioned her worth, were now silent. They were no longer looking at her as a mere server. They were looking at her with a new sense of respect, realizing that she was the one with the knowledge, the expertise, and the power to make this deal happen. And Maria knew it. She had never felt more alive. It wasn't just about the deal anymore. It was about proving to herself that she was more than the world had ever given her credit for. It was about standing tall, holding her ground, and showing everyone, including herself, that she had something valuable to offer. Richard cleared his throat again, but this time, he was no longer the center of attention. One of his colleagues, a senior executive named Mark, leaned forward, his eyes locked on Maria. "Maria," Mark said, his voice low and respectful, "you've just saved this deal. If it weren't for you, we might have lost everything." Richard stiffened in his chair, but there was nothing he could say to undo the shift that had just occurred. Maria's heart raced, but she stayed calm. She had done what she needed to do. She had shown the world her worth, and now, they had no choice but to recognize it. Richard Owens, for all his power, was now the one who was left speechless. As the meeting wrapped up, Richard's team scrambled to make sense of the information Maria had so easily provided. They quickly realized that the insights she had offered were crucial to the success of the deal. Richard, still trying to salvage his pride, turned to her. "Maria," he said, his voice strained but earnest, "I owe you an apology. You've proven me wrong." Maria nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not looking for an apology, Mr. Owens. I'm just here to do my job." With that, she walked out of the room, leaving behind a group of executives who would never underestimate her again. The power had shifted, and Maria had earned her place at the table. It wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about proving to herself that she had the strength, the intelligence, and the ability to take control of her own destiny. And in that moment, Maria Carter knew that this was only the beginning. I had never imagined a moment like this would come. Maria walked out of that conference room with her head held high, but it wasn't the applause or praise she was seeking. She had already proven everything she needed to prove, not to the room full of powerful men, but to herself. The whispers behind her back, the condescending smirks, they all faded away. As she walked through the sleek, polished halls of the office building, the echoes of her footsteps were different now. They were the sound of a woman who had just rewritten her story. Richard Owens, The billionaire CEO who had once thought of her as nothing more than a servant was still sitting at the table, surrounded by his team, trying to recover from the shock of what had just happened. He had underestimated her, belittled her, and now, Maria had shown him that the real power in that room was never in wealth, but in knowledge, in understanding, and in the courage to stand up for oneself. Back in the office, Maria's phone buzzed. It was a text from her friend, Lucas, a fellow waiter at the restaurant. "Did you hear what happened? Everyone's talking about you. You saved the deal. The CEO just apologized." Maria couldn't help but smile, but she quickly shook it off. This wasn't about saving anyone or being a hero. This was just her being herself, doing what she knew best. But deep down, she knew this was a turning point. She wasn't the same person who had walked into that room just hours earlier. She had earned her place in the world, not by playing the game, but by changing it. Richard Owens, who had once belittled her, now found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about success. The morning after the meeting, Richard's assistant called Maria. "Mr. Owens would like to meet with you again. He wants to offer you a consulting position at the company." Maria raised an eyebrow. "A consulting position?" she repeated. It was clear this wasn't just about business anymore. It was about respect. Richard wanted to make amends, to show that he understood the value Maria brought to the table. He wasn't just offering her a job. He was acknowledging that the world, in all its power, had overlooked people like her for far too long. When they met, Richard was more subdued than he had been in the meeting. He wasn't the arrogant, self-assured man he had been the day before. Instead, he was quiet, humble even. "Maria," he began, "I want to apologize again. What you did in that room, it was nothing short of extraordinary. I realize now that I underestimated you, and I'm offering you a position at my company as a consultant for international expansion." Maria paused, looking at him. She could feel the sincerity in his words. But more than that, she felt something deeper, a shift in the world around her. It wasn't just Richard who had changed, it was everything. She could see how the world had begun to recognize her, not for what she did, but for who she was. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She wasn't just someone who had been overlooked. She was someone who had the ability to make a difference, to shift the course of events with a single action, a single word. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Owens," Maria said, her voice steady. "But I don't need to be a consultant to prove my worth. I'm already where I need to be." Richard looked at her, surprised by her response. But then he nodded, acknowledging the quiet power in her words. "You're right," he said. "You've already proven everything." And with that, the dynamic shifted once again. Maria wasn't a part of Richard's world. She had her own world now, one where she wasn't defined by her job, her skin color, or her past. She was defined by her intelligence, her resilience, and her courage. As she left the meeting, Maria felt a sense of pride she hadn't known before. She had rewritten her own story, and in doing so, she had inspired a room full of powerful people to rethink their own perceptions. The world wasn't just changing for her. It was changing for everyone who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, or ignored. Maria wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. In the days that followed her meeting with Richard Owens, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. The offer to consult for his company lingered in her mind, but so did the silent promise she had made to herself, the promise to never let anyone define her by the limits they placed on her. Instead of taking Richard's offer, Maria made the choice to carve her own path. She didn't need to work for the billionaire CEO to prove her worth. She had already proven everything she needed to, and now it was time to build her own empire. But before that, she knew she had to confront the moment that had made all of this possible. She walked into the Bayou Spoon that afternoon, a restaurant that had once felt like her world, her sanctuary. Now, it felt like a chapter that was closing. Maria looked around at the familiar faces of her coworkers, the ones who had watched her for years as she moved through the motions of serving, the ones who knew her story. "Hey, Maria," Lucas called out, his voice filled with curiosity. "What happened with that meeting? Everyone's still talking about you." Maria smiled, but there was a tinge of sadness in her expression. "It's over, Lucas," she said, her voice calm but sure. "It's time for something new." Lucas blinked in surprise. "You mean, you're not going to work with Richard Owens?" Maria shook her head. "No, I'm not. I have bigger plans." It was then that she realized how far she had come. She wasn't the girl who had walked into that meeting just days before, unsure of her place in the world. She was someone who had taken control of her destiny. What kind of plans? Lucas asked, genuinely interested. Maria didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to be invisible anymore. I'm going to start my own company, she said, her voice filled with determination. I've been overlooked my whole life, and now I'm going to help other people who feel the same way. I'm going to give them the opportunity to show the world what they're capable of, just like I did. Lucas stared at her, eyes wide with admiration. That's amazing, Maria. You're really doing it, huh? Maria nodded. Yeah, I am. She wasn't sure exactly what her company would look like, but she knew it would be something that empowered others, something that allowed people like her to rise above the expectations others placed on them. As the weeks passed, Maria threw herself into her new venture, using the knowledge and skills she had developed over the years to create a business that was built on inclusivity, intelligence, and opportunity. She didn't want to just be a success. She wanted to create a space where others could succeed alongside her. She reached out to former colleagues, friends, and even people she had met during her time at the restaurant. She knew it would take time to build, but she wasn't in any rush. This was her moment, and she was going to savor every part of it. But the world wasn't going to let Maria's success go unnoticed. Her story spread like wildfire. Articles were written about the waitress who spoke 9 languages and saved a billion-dollar deal. Videos of the moment Richard Owens was left speechless went viral. People who had once ignored her now wanted to hear her story. Media outlets reached out for interviews. Business leaders who had dismissed her now wanted to know how she had done it. Maria stayed grounded through it all. She wasn't doing this for the fame, the accolades, or the recognition. She was doing it for herself, for the people who had been overlooked and underestimated, for the quiet power that she knew had always been inside of her. One evening, Maria received a call from Richard Owens himself. His voice was different now, filled with respect and admiration. Maria, I've been watching you, he said. What you've built, it's incredible. I want to be a part of it. At first, Maria didn't know what to say. Richard had once seen her as nothing more than a tool in his game. But now, he was asking to join her in hers. Thank you, Richard, Maria said, her voice steady. But I'm doing just fine on my own. I'm building something that's mine, and I don't need anyone else to define it for me. Richard paused, and Maria could hear the understanding in his silence. I respect that, Maria, he finally said. You've earned your place. Keep doing what you're doing. I'll be watching. And just like that, Maria knew that she had done more than just rise above the expectations of others. She had created a legacy, one that would inspire future generations to believe in their own worth, no matter how the world tried to ignore them. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a force in the business world, a beacon of hope for those who had been told they were never enough. Maria Carter wasn't just changing the game. She was rewriting the rules. As Maria continued to build her business, the world around her began to take notice. The headlines had been filled with stories of her brilliance, her unshakable confidence, and the remarkable way she had turned a chance encounter with a billionaire CEO into the beginning of a whole new journey. But what mattered most to Maria was not the spotlight. It was the opportunity she was creating for others. She wanted to prove that anyone, regardless of their background, had the potential to achieve greatness. She wanted to open doors for people who had been told their whole lives that they didn't belong, that they couldn't make it. For Maria, the path to success wasn't about being famous. It was about making sure that everyone who deserved a seat at the table had one. Months passed, and her company began to flourish. Maria had transformed the initial spark of her idea into a fully fledged business, one that focused on empowering marginalized voices, connecting global markets, and creating opportunities for diverse talent. She had brought together a team of like-minded individuals, each with their own unique stories and strengths. It was a place where everyone, no matter their background, was given a chance to contribute, to grow, and to shine. The more her company grew, the more Maria felt a sense of responsibility. She wasn't just creating something for herself, she was creating a legacy. She wanted to show the world that people like her, people who had been overlooked and dismissed, could rise to the top. But the path was not without its challenges. As Maria's business gained momentum, so did the scrutiny. People began questioning her success, speculating about how she had managed to achieve so much in such a short amount of time. Some assumed that she had used her brief encounter with Richard Owens as a stepping stone, that she had capitalized on the attention he had given her to secure her position. But Maria knew better. She hadn't built this company because of Richard Owens. She had built it because she believed in herself and in the people who shared her vision. One day, as Maria sat in her office overlooking the city skyline, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Richard. "Maria," the message began, "I've been watching you. Your company is making waves, and I want to talk. I've got an offer for you." Maria smiled as she read the message. She had expected this. She had known that Richard, now fully aware of the impact she was making, would eventually reach out. But she wasn't going to be swayed by his offer, no matter how tempting it might be. She had built her company on her own terms, and she wasn't about to let anyone take that away from her. A few hours later, she found herself sitting across from Richard in a luxurious conference room. His demeanor had changed. The arrogance he had once displayed was gone, replaced with a sense of humility. "Maria," he said, "I'm impressed. You've done something incredible. I want to help you take this to the next level." Maria met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I appreciate the offer, Richard," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm doing just fine on my own. I didn't build this company with the help of anyone else, and I'm not looking for that now." Richard nodded, as if he had expected this answer. "I respect that, Maria," he said. "You've earned your place. But I can't help but think that together, we could do even more." Maria paused, considering his words. She didn't want to admit it, but a part of her wondered what they could accomplish together. Richard had resources, connections, and a level of influence that she could never match on her own. But that wasn't why she had started this business. She had started it to prove that success didn't have to come from privilege or power. It had to come from determination and a belief in something bigger than yourself. "I didn't build this company to be anyone's sidekick, Richard," Maria said, her voice firm. "I built it to show people like me that they can do more, be more, and achieve more. I'm not here to be someone's project. I'm here to make a difference on my own terms." Richard sat back in his chair, his face thoughtful. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I get it, Maria. You've got something special. And you're right. You don't need me to succeed. But if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me." Maria stood up, offering him a firm handshake. "Thank you, Richard. But I think I'm exactly where I need to be." As Richard left the office, Maria felt a sense of clarity wash over her. She wasn't just building a business. She was building a movement that would change the way people saw themselves and the way the world saw them. She wasn't just creating opportunities for herself. She was creating opportunities for everyone who had ever been told they couldn't make it. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more obstacles, and more people who tried to tear her down. But Maria had already proven that she could overcome anything. And with every step, she was making her mark on the world. She wasn't just a waitress turned entrepreneur. She was a symbol of everything that was possible when you refused to let anyone else define your worth. Months passed, and Maria's business continued to grow in ways she hadn't even imagined. The early challenges were still fresh in her mind. The late nights, the sacrifices, the doubts. But now, as she sat in her office overlooking the skyline of New York City, she realized that those challenges had only fueled her drive. Her company, which started as a small idea to empower others, had expanded into something much bigger. Maria had built a network of like-minded individuals who believed in the same mission, to create opportunities for those who had been overlooked and underestimated. It wasn't just about business. It was about changing lives. Maria had become a symbol of what was possible for people who had been told they would never make it. She had proven that success didn't require connections, wealth, or a perfect background. It required grit, determination, and a belief in yourself. But Maria knew that she couldn't stop here. She had created something powerful, but it was still just the beginning. She had always believed that power came from knowledge, and now she was ready to use that knowledge to push the boundaries even further. She had been in the game for long enough to understand that real change didn't come from staying in your comfort zone. It came from taking risks and challenging the status quo. One afternoon, Maria received a call that would change the course of her business. It was from a prestigious venture capital firm that had been watching her rise. They wanted to invest in her company. At first, Maria was skeptical. She had been offered investments before, but they came with strings attached, expectations that didn't align with her values. But this time, something felt different. She listened carefully as the firm's representative explained their vision. They weren't just looking for a return on investment. They wanted to help her scale her business in a way that would bring about real change. They saw what Maria saw: the potential to disrupt industries, to create opportunities for marginalized communities, and to bring a new perspective to the business world. As Maria sat there, listening to the possibilities, she realized that this was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when everything aligned. She had built her business from the ground up, and now she had the chance to take it to new heights. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the opportunity to make an even bigger impact. After much consideration, Maria agreed to the investment. But she made one thing clear: she wouldn't compromise her values. The investment would only happen on her terms. The firm agreed, and with that, Maria's company was poised for growth like never before. As the news of the investment spread, Maria found herself at the center of attention once again. The business world, once skeptical of her unconventional approach, was now taking notes. Articles were written about her success, about how she had defied the odds and built a business that was not only profitable, but also meaningful. But even with all the attention, Maria remained focused on what mattered most: her mission to create a space where people like her could thrive. As the months went by, Maria's company expanded into new markets, and her team grew. She brought in experts from different fields, ensuring that the company would remain diverse, inclusive, and forward-thinking. Maria had always known that success wasn't a solo journey. It was about the people who walked alongside you. She had surrounded herself with a team that believed in her vision, and together, they were building something truly special. But with success came new challenges. Maria had to navigate the complexities of scaling a business, balancing growth with maintaining the integrity of the mission. She had to ensure that her company stayed true to its values, even as it grew larger and more influential. It wasn't always easy, but Maria was no stranger to hard work. She had learned long ago that if you wanted something done right, you had to do it yourself. She stayed involved in every aspect of the business, from hiring decisions to strategic partnerships. She didn't want to lose sight of the purpose that had driven her from the beginning: to create a world where anyone, no matter their background, had the chance to succeed. One evening, as she sat in her office reflecting on everything she had accomplished, Maria received a message from Richard Owens. It had been months since their last meeting, and she hadn't heard from him since. The message was brief, but it spoke volumes. "Maria," it read, "I've been watching. You've built something incredible. I was wrong about you, and I want to make things right. Let's talk." Maria sat back in her chair, the weight of his words sinking in. It had taken him this long to admit what she had known all along: that success wasn't just about wealth and power. It was about creating something that lasted, something that changed lives. She smiled to herself, knowing that the road ahead would be even more challenging. But she was ready for whatever came next. She had proven to herself, and to the world, that when you believe in your vision and refuse to give up, anything is possible. Maria Carter had not only built a business, she had built a movement, and that movement was just getting started. Maria sat in her office late that night, the city lights casting a soft glow through the large windows, her mind racing with the news she had just received. Richard Owens, the billionaire CEO who had once dismissed her, had reached out again, this time with a clear offer: a chance to collaborate. Maria couldn't help but feel a mixture of emotions. She had come so far, built something meaningful from the ground up, and now here was Richard, asking for a second chance, asking to be part of her journey. But Maria knew this wasn't just about business. It was about power, respect, and integrity. She had worked tirelessly to make sure her company stood for something more than just profits. It was about changing the narrative, proving that anyone could succeed if given the right opportunities, regardless of their background. She wasn't about to let that vision slip away now. As she pondered the situation, her phone rang. It was a video call from Lucas, one of her trusted team members. She had always relied on Lucas for advice, as he was one of the few who had been with her from the very beginning. "Hey, Maria," Lucas greeted, his voice cheerful, but there was a glimmer of curiosity in his eyes. "What's going on? You've been quiet today. Everything all right?" Maria leaned back in her chair and sighed. "Richard reached out again," she said, rubbing her eyes. He wants to work together. He's finally admitting that I was right about the potential of my business. But I don't know if I can trust him. Lucas raised an eyebrow. You've built something great, Maria. You're changing the game. Why bring him in now? Maria looked at her screen, her gaze steady. Because part of me wonders if we could do more together. But another part of me thinks I've done this on my own. I don't need anyone to validate what I've created. Lucas nodded thoughtfully, understanding her hesitation. You've earned everything, Maria. Whatever decision you make, it has to be for the right reasons. Don't let him rewrite your story. You're the one who's making the impact. Maria smiled, grateful for his words. Thanks, Lucas. I needed to hear that. She ended the call, her thoughts still swirling. She knew she couldn't let Richard's offer cloud her judgment. She had always believed that true power came from within, from knowing who you were and what you stood for. And she wasn't about to let anyone, no matter how powerful, take that away from her. The next morning, Maria called Richard. She was calm, measured, and sure of her decision. Richard, she began, I've thought a lot about your offer. But I'm not looking for validation anymore. I've built something that stands on its own. I don't need your help to succeed. I appreciate the gesture, but I'm going to continue down my own path. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Richard responded. Maria, I understand. I respect your decision. You've proven yourself, and I can see now that you don't need anyone's approval. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. Maria felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had made the right choice. Thank you, Richard. But I'm not doing this for anyone else. I'm doing it for myself and for the people who believe in what I'm creating. As she hung up the phone, Maria couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She had built this business from the ground up, and now it was hers, completely and entirely. She didn't need anyone's approval or validation. She had already proven everything she needed to prove. But even as Maria moved forward with her plans, she knew that her journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, still barriers to break, still obstacles to overcome. But she was ready. She had faced the hardest moments in her life and come out stronger on the other side. Now, she was ready to face whatever came next with the same determination and drive that had gotten her this far. Maria wasn't just building a company. She was building a movement that would change the way the world saw people like her. She wasn't a waitress, a woman of color, or a person who had been overlooked anymore. She was Maria Carter, a force to be reckoned with. And she was just getting started. Months passed, and Maria's business continued to thrive. She had made a name for herself as a leader who wasn't afraid to break the rules and change the game. What had once started as a small company in a crowded industry had now grown into an influential force in the market. Maria had become a role model, a symbol of resilience and determination. But as she looked at the city skyline from her office window one late evening, she realized something. There was still so much to do. Her business had been successful, but it wasn't just about success anymore. It was about creating a lasting impact. Maria had always believed in the power of knowledge, in the ability of people to rise above the limitations placed on them. And now, with her company growing and her influence expanding, she knew it was time to take her mission even further. She couldn't just focus on her business anymore. She had to change the way people thought about opportunity, about success, and about what it meant to truly build something meaningful. Maria began to think bigger. She started investing in educational programs, in mentorship opportunities, and in communities that needed the resources to reach their full potential. She was determined to give back, to help others achieve the same success she had, but with more support, more access, and more guidance along the way. It wasn't just about making money. It was about creating a ripple effect that would change lives, one person at a time. She began partnering with schools and community organizations, providing scholarships for underprivileged students, offering internships to young people who hadn't had the chance to get their foot in the door, and working with mentors who could guide them through the challenges of building a career. Maria's company became known not just for its profits, but for its purpose. The mission was clear: to level the playing field, to create opportunities for those who had been overlooked, and to give them the tools they needed to succeed. Her team was fully on board. They saw the vision and were inspired by her unwavering commitment to change. Together, they worked tirelessly to implement these initiatives, knowing that every small step could lead to a larger transformation. As Maria sat in one of the mentoring sessions with a group of young women eager to learn, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. The women were from all walks of life. Some were first-generation college students. Others were working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. But they all shared a common dream: to build a better life for themselves and their families. Maria listened to their stories, their hopes, and their fears, and she realized something profound. She wasn't just helping them build careers. She was helping them build confidence. She was helping them see that they could do more than just survive. They could thrive. The impact of these efforts became clear over time. The young women Maria mentored began to land jobs at prestigious companies. They started their own businesses, became leaders in their fields, and most importantly, they became advocates for others who needed help. The ripple effect Maria had set in motion was growing, spreading across communities, across industries, and even across countries. She had become a catalyst for change, but it wasn't just about her story anymore. It was about the countless stories of success that were being written by the people she had helped. But even with all the progress, Maria knew there would always be challenges. She had never been naive about the road ahead. She had faced countless obstacles herself, and she knew that not everyone would be supportive of her mission. There would be people who doubted her, who questioned her motives, and who tried to tear down what she had built. But Maria had learned to navigate those challenges with grace and determination. She had learned to tune out the noise and focus on what truly mattered. And what mattered to her most was the legacy she was building, the lives she was changing. One day, as she was preparing for another meeting, Maria received a call from Richard Owens. The same CEO who had once underestimated her, the one who had dismissed her abilities as a waitress, was now reaching out again. This time, his tone was different. It wasn't condescending or dismissive. It was respectful. "Maria," Richard began, "I've been watching what you've built, and I have to admit, I was wrong. What you're doing is incredible. You've not only built a business, you've built a movement, and I want to be part of it." Maria listened carefully. She could feel his sincerity, but she wasn't sure where this conversation was going. "Richard, I appreciate the kind words," Maria replied. "But my mission has always been about more than just making deals or getting recognition. It's about creating lasting change. And I'm already on that path." Richard paused for a moment, then spoke again, his voice filled with admiration. "I get it, and I respect that. But if you ever want to take this to an even bigger stage, if you ever want to make an even greater impact, you know where to find me." Maria didn't answer immediately. She thought about everything she had built, everything she had accomplished. And for a moment, she allowed herself to consider the possibilities of what they could achieve together. But ultimately, Maria knew that her journey had always been about making her own way, and she wasn't going to stop now. "Thank you, Richard," she finally said. "But I'm exactly where I need to be." As she hung up the phone, Maria felt a deep sense of peace. She wasn't seeking validation anymore. She wasn't looking for approval from anyone. She had built something meaningful, and she was continuing to build it on her own terms. And no matter what challenges came her way, she knew she had the strength to face them. Maria had found her purpose, and now, she was living it, changing lives and leaving a legacy that would inspire generations to come. As the years passed, Maria's business not only survived but flourished. Her company had transformed from a small idea into an international powerhouse. She had built something bigger than herself, a community, a movement, a testament to resilience, intelligence, and hard work. She had defied expectations, broken barriers, and changed the game in ways that few could have predicted. But Maria knew that her journey was not just about business success. It had never been about wealth or fame. It had always been about impact, about proving that anyone, regardless of their background, could rise to the top. Maria had started with a simple goal: to create a space where people who were often overlooked could thrive. She had given opportunities to people who had been told they were not enough, just as she had once been told. And now, the world was noticing. From speaking at international conferences to working with global leaders, Maria had become a force in the business world. She had earned respect not because of her position or title, but because of the values she held and the difference she had made. She often thought back to that moment when Richard Owens had offered her a consulting job, how she had turned him down. At the time, it had been a hard decision, but now, looking back, she realized that it had been the right one. She had built something of her own, on her own terms. And that meant more to her than anything. As her company expanded, Maria continued to invest in the causes she cared about. She funded scholarships for underprivileged students, mentored young women in business, and supported initiatives that focused on diversity and inclusion. She didn't just want to change the world through her business. She wanted to change the world through her actions. Her legacy wasn't just about her company's success. It was about the lives she had touched, the doors she had opened for others, and the lives that were now being changed because of the opportunities she had created. One day, as Maria sat at her desk in her office, overlooking the bustling city below, she received a message. It was from Lucas, one of her first team members. "Maria, we've been nominated for the Global Leadership Award. They want to recognize the impact we've made on the global stage." Maria couldn't help but smile. The recognition was gratifying, but it wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was the work they were doing, the lives they were changing, and the legacy they were building together. As she reflected on the journey, Maria realized how far she had come. She had gone from being a young waitress, dismissed and underestimated, to a leader who was shaping the future of business. She had shown the world that success didn't depend on where you started, but on your willingness to fight for what you believed in. And she had done it all while staying true to her values. She wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a pioneer, a trailblazer, a leader who inspired others to believe in themselves. Maria had proven that the real power was not in wealth or status, but in the ability to change the world for the better. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that her work wasn't finished. There were still challenges to face, still obstacles to overcome, but she was ready. Maria had learned that the road to success was never easy, but it was always worth it. She had built a legacy, one that would continue to inspire generations to come. As the phone buzzed with another incoming call, Maria smiled. She didn't know what the future held, but she was no longer afraid. She had proven that with enough determination and the right mindset, anything was possible. Maria Carter was no longer the woman who had been dismissed, who had been told she wasn't good enough. She was now the woman who had changed the world, and she was just getting started. In this inspiring Black story, a young waitress, underestimated by those around her, proves that true power comes from knowledge, resilience, and the ability to stand up for yourself. This is a story of how a Black woman defied expectations, built her own empire, and changed the way the world views success. It is a tale of transformation and empowerment, showing that anyone, no matter their background, can rise to the top. The journey of Maria Carter, once dismissed and overlooked, becomes a symbol of what is possible when you believe in yourself and refuse to be defined by others. From serving tables to owning a thriving business, this Black story challenges the status quo and inspires others to believe that they too can succeed. Through hard work, dedication, and unwavering belief, Maria not only changed her life, but also the lives of countless others. Her story is a testament to the power of never giving up, to the strength that comes from within, and to the importance of creating opportunities for those who are often overlooked. The ripple effect of her success continues to inspire and uplift communities, proving that the most profound changes often come from those who have been underestimated. Maria's Black story is one of triumph, resilience, and the undeniable truth that success is not determined by your starting point, but by the belief in your own potential.